All right, Raptors Nation, we need to have a serious conversation right now because game one is done. It happened. It hurt 126 to 113. And yeah, that stings. But here's the thing. Game two on Monday night is not just another playoff game. Game two is the entire tone of this series. If the Raptors go to Cleveland and steal this game before the series shifts back to Toronto, everything changes. The momentum shifts, the pressure flips, and suddenly a team that everyone is counting out has the Cavaliers looking over their shoulder. But if Cleveland goes up 2-0 before this series even comes to Scotiabank Arena, that is a hole that is going to be extremely difficult to climb out of for a young team in their first playoff run in 4 years. So Monday night is massive, absolutely massive. And if you want to understand exactly what the Raptors need to do differently and why this series is far from over, you are in the right place. Subscribe to this channel right now if you have not already, because we are covering every single game of this playoff run in full detail, and you are not going to want to miss any of it. Let's get into everything. So let's start with the honest, unfiltered reality of what happened in game one. The Raptors lost by 13 points, and it felt like the game was never truly in their control for extended stretches in the second half. Now, losing a road playoff opener against a fourth seed is not the end of the world. It happens. Road teams lose game one all the time and come back to win series. That is just basketball. But what matters is not the loss itself. What matters is why it happened and whether the adjustments being made between games actually address the root causes. And when you look at game one honestly and without any emotional filtering, a few things stand out very clearly as the areas that have to be fixed before Monday night's tip-off. The biggest and most glaring issue is Brandon Ingram. And I want to be really careful about how I frame this because I am not here to pile on a guy who is trying to figure out his role in his first real playoff run. But the numbers from game one tell a story that cannot be ignored. 17 points on 9 field goal attempts in 36 minutes of action. And perhaps most alarming, just 1 field goal attempt in the entire second half. 1 for your leading scorer. In a playoff game where the Raptors desperately needed offense down the stretch. That is not a Cleveland defensive scheme issue alone. That is a Toronto offensive connectivity issue. Ingram was not being found. He was not being put in positions to be aggressive. And whether that is a play design problem, a spacing problem, a ball movement problem, or some combination of all three, Darko Rajakovic and this coaching staff have identified it as the #1 priority to fix heading into game two. And to his credit, Ingram himself was completely direct about what needs to change. Be more aggressive, have more connection with his teammates about where he wants the ball, create more actions that put him in positions to attack, catch, and shoot opportunities, drives to the rim, kickouts in the short roll. That self-awareness and that directness is actually really encouraging. A player who knows what he needs to do differently is a player who can actually do it differently. And Jamal Shead made a statement after film study that I think deserves a lot of attention. When asked about Ingram's 9 field goal attempt game one performance, Shead looked directly at the camera and said, "That will not happen again." That is not a throwaway comment. That is a point guard who has studied the film, who understands how Cleveland was scheming to take Ingram out of the offense, and who is making a personal commitment to make sure his all-star teammate gets the ball in positions to be successful. That is real leadership from a guy who is only in this starting lineup because Emmanuel Quickley is dealing with that hamstring strain. And speaking of which, let's talk about the Quickley situation because it is genuinely one of the most important variables heading into Monday night. Quickley is listed as questionable for game two, and Darko was about as clear as a head coach can be about how much this team missed him in game one, the spacing he provides, the way he organizes the offense, his shooting gravity that creates room for Barnes and Ingram to operate. All of it was absent in game one, and all of it contributed to the offensive struggles that plagued Toronto in the second half. If Quickley can go on Monday night, even at 70 or 75% health, it changes the entire calculus of what Cleveland has to defend. Because right now the Cavaliers know that they can load up their defensive attention on Barnes and Ingram without worrying as much about perimeter shooting from the point guard spot. The moment Quickley is on the floor, that changes. Defenses have to respect him. And when defenses have to respect your shooters, the lanes open up for your stars to operate. His return would be massive. Not just symbolically massive, but practically, strategically, basketball massive. Now I want to spend some real time on the defensive side of this conversation because I think it is getting overshadowed by all the talk about the offensive adjustments. Donovan Mitchell and James Harden combined for 54 points and 14 assists in game one. 54 and 14. That is not a sustainable number to give up to any backcourt in the NBA, but especially not to two players with the playoff pedigree and the offensive sophistication of Mitchell and Harden. Mitchell is one of the most lethal playoff scorers in the league. The man is called Mr. Playoff for a reason, and he reminded everyone why in Game 1. And Harden, as much as people want to count him out and write narratives about his decline, showed in that game that he still has the ability to read a defense, manipulate pick-and-roll coverages, and make every single play that a team needs him to make at the right moment. The Raptors are going to have to be dramatically better at containing both of these guys on Monday night. And the most interesting development on that front is the possibility of expanding Scotty Barnes' defensive assignment. Barnes switched on to Harden in the fourth quarter of Game 1, and it was not a coincidence that it happened in the situation it did. Darko was testing it, seeing how it looked, getting a feel for whether Barnes matching up with Harden more consistently could disrupt Cleveland's offensive rhythm. And the answer, based on everything coming out of the Toronto camp, seems to be yes. Barnes is one of the best and most versatile defenders in the entire NBA. His combination of size, length, athleticism, and basketball intelligence makes him uniquely capable of making life difficult for a player like Harden, who relies so heavily on creating angles, drawing fouls, and manufacturing advantages in the pick and roll. If Barnes is spending meaningful time on Harden from the jump in Game 2 rather than waiting until garbage time, that is a significant tactical shift that could pay real dividends. And then there is Colin Murray-Boyles. Because I have to talk about this rookie. I absolutely have to. Because in the middle of a difficult Game 1 loss in his very first career playoff game on the road in a loud, hostile environment, Colin Murray-Boyles went out there and played 14 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists while also being one of the better defenders on the floor for Toronto. That is a remarkable playoff debut for a rookie, full stop. And what makes it even more impressive is the context. He was not just putting up numbers against a weak opponent. He was doing it against a team that had James Harden and Donovan Mitchell operating at an elite level. The fact that Murray-Boyles held his own defensively in that environment, that he was active and engaged and making the right reads, should absolutely be translating into expanded minutes in Game 2. His mobility in the pick and roll, his ability to switch onto multiple positions without being exploited, his defensive instincts that are genuinely advanced for his age. All of those tools are exactly what this Raptors team needs more of against Cleveland's offensive scheme. And what Murray-Boyles said after the game was one of the most mature, clear-eyed assessments of a playoff loss that I have heard from a rookie in a very long time. He talked about how Cleveland is a really good team with great pieces all around. He acknowledged that the Raptors got away from their brand of basketball and could not get it back in time. He talked about how everything takes a step up in the playoffs, the physicality, the attention to detail, literally everything. And then he said something that I want to write down and put on a poster somewhere. We have a lot to learn from for sure. That is not a guy who is deflated by losing. That is not a guy who is overwhelmed by the moment. That is a guy who is processing the experience, extracting the lessons, and already thinking about how to apply them in Game 2. And honestly, that mentality, that learning-oriented, growth-focused approach to a playoff loss sounds exactly like what Darko Rajakovic has been instilling in this group all season long, because Darko's comments heading into Game 2 were fascinating to me. When he talked about the long conversations his staff had about adjustments, about all the things they need to clean up and do better, he framed it as exciting. He actually used the word exciting, and I think that tells you everything about where this coaching staff's head is at right now. They are not panicking. They are not pointing fingers. They are not second-guessing themselves. They are approaching a one-game playoff deficit the same way they have approached every obstacle all season, as an opportunity to grow, to adjust, to get better, and to show what this team is actually made of. That coaching continuity and that consistency of message in a moment that could easily become chaotic is something that should genuinely give Raptors fans confidence heading into Monday night. Here is the historical context that adds some weight to this moment. The Raptors have not won a playoff series since defeating the Brooklyn Nets in the first round of the 2020 bubble playoffs. That is a long time. And their playoff record against Cleveland, specifically 11 straight losses in the postseason dating back years, is a number that has been hanging over this matchup all week. I am not going to pretend that history does not matter, because it does in sports. History matters psychologically. It matters in terms of how teams carry themselves in high-pressure moments. And breaking a streak like that, especially on the road, is going to require the Raptors to be better than they were in Game 1 in every measurable way. But here is what I keep coming back to. This Raptors team has already exceeded every expectation set for them this season. They were supposed to be a borderline 500 team. They won 46 games. They were supposed to be in the play-in conversation. They finished as a 5 seed. They have been exceeding the script all year. and nothing about what happened in game one tells me that they do not have the capability to go into Cleveland on Monday night and take this game. The pieces are there. The adjustments have been identified. The players are motivated and clear-eyed about what needs to change. Ingram knows he needs to be more aggressive. The team knows they need to find him more consistently. Murray Boyles is ready to step into a bigger role. Barnes is ready to take on a more demanding defensive assignment against Harden. And if Quickly can suit up even at limited capacity, the offensive spacing that was so clearly missing in game one suddenly returns. Monday night is everything. Win it, and the Raptors go home with the series tied and a home crowd ready to absolutely erupt for Game 3. Lose it, and they are in serious trouble with their backs against the wall in a series that is already tilted against them. The Raptors have shown all season long that they rise to big moments. Now it is time to rise to the biggest moment they have faced since this rebuild began. I cannot wait for Monday night, and I know you feel exactly the same way. Drop your Game 2 predictions in the comments right now. Does Toronto steal one in Cleveland? How does Ingram respond? Does Quickly play? Let me know everything. And make sure you are subscribed because our Game 2 breakdown is going to be live the moment that final buzzer sounds.